Hello, my name is Jacek, and I work at the Department of Translation Studies of our institute. I'm here to talk about translation and translation studies. I have decided to call the talk, the lecture, whatever you may call it, Translation 101. There is a weak pun in it. You have probably guessed already what it is. When you name a course 101, it means it is for beginners. But when it's spelled with letters, it can tell you that translation is unique. It's the only one. It's O1, Translation 101. So this is what the talk will be about. Some technical matters first. I have to perform a few clicks to switch sharing the screen. Oh, it seems I am already sharing the screen, so that's all right. So what I need to do now is to start the presentation. And here it begins. Okay, the title page, Translation 101. And we may begin. I feel a bit strange, I have to tell you, because I am used to the interaction from the audience, from my students. And here I am talking continuously, no one interrupting me. Very strange feeling, but well, there will be, it will be possible to interact. I will explain everything in a moment. A link will be given at the end of this presentation and will also accompany the video, a link to an, let's call it an exercise form, through which you can send me some feedback. And also you can answer some questions. It will be scored. You will receive a score to see, you will be able to see how much you remember from our talk, how much you remember from the lecture. So the link to the interaction form is coming. Let me begin by saying that translation is easy and everyone can do it. Let's begin with some examples. Okay, here's one. It says hand grenade. Many of those on the net. If you are stolen, call the police at once. No littering. Violators will be fined. Please do not empty your dog here. No drinking water is prohibited to get wet here. One more perhaps. Danger. Slip and fall down carefully. And finally, I think the final example, be aware of invisibility. Those prove that everybody can translate. You need no skill at all. Before we move on, we need to define the topic, define translation. Think of your own definition of translation in one or two sentences. And later on, when you click on the link to the exercise form, you will be able to type your definition in. But let's have a look at some existing definitions. So here's one coming from the Concise Oxford English Dictionary, and it gives translation as a noun two meanings. Number one is the act or an instance of translating. So translation as a process, translation as an activity. And the other, the second sense from the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, is that translation is a written or spoken expression of the meaning of a word speech, book, etc. in another language. Well, it's Oxford English Dictionary, so the definition is perfect. But on the other hand, from the scientific point of view, it isn't, because it contains, have a look at the second point here, expression of, there is this phrase there, expression of the meaning of a word, speech, book, etc. in another language. And now you may ask what this expression is, expression of meaning in another language. The simple answer would be translation. So in short, this definition tells us that translation is translation. Well, no definition is perfect, and this, although a short and elegant one, is not perfect either. So we still don't know, need another definition. So let's have a look at the next one. Right, it comes from the Dictionary of Translation Studies by Shuttleworth and Coe, 1997. Translation. An incredibly broad notion that can be understood in many different ways. For example, one may talk of translation as a process or a product and identify such subtypes as literary translation, technical translation, subtitling, and machine translation. Moreover, while more typically it refers to the transfer of written texts, the term sometimes also includes interpreting. This is a much better definition. One could say, well, it's not quite a definition, but more like a list of categories that are included in the notion, in the sense of the word, but still, it certainly gives you, even if it's not perfect, it gives you a sense of what translation is. Well, what they say is a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's try a diagram. Here it is. I hope you can see it. Here is a diagram showing us, demonstrating the complexity of the subject, of the topic that is translation. So if you just look at one part of it called language engineering, we have machine translation, corpora, terminology, lexicology, multimedia. Another cross-section is philosophy, where we talk of hermeneutics, post-structuralism, and deconstruction. Please look them up. We will not have time today to discuss all of them and define all of them. Just concentrate on one of those subtopics. I will tell you in a moment which. Have a look at the linguistic connections. Those will be semantics, pragmatic, social linguistics, contrastive linguistics, corpus linguistics, cognitive linguistics, text discourse analysis, literary studies. We are here in this circle now with poetics, rhetoric, literary criticism, narratology, critical discourse analyses, comparative literature, and finally cultural studies, film studies, language and power ideologies, gender studies, gay studies, history, post-colonialism. Those are just some interdisciplinary connections of translation. And when or if you come to study at our Institute for English Studies in Wrocław, and you choose translation as your major topic, as your major subject, as your specialization, you will be able to study many of those topics. Perhaps not all of them. It will depend on your choice of those so-called elective courses. But some of them will be compulsory, and that includes, for example, lexicology, which here in this diagram is categorized as part of language engineering, but also typically it is classified as part of the study of linguistics, the study of language. And the main subject of lexicology, well, that will come in a moment, but lexicology is called the science of words. So when we study lexicology, we want to learn everything is to learn about words. And the first question, when you have this course, the first question that will be asked, and will be an attempt at an answer to this question, is, if we are talking about the lexicon, all the words of a language, the first question is, where do all those words come from? This is the question. This is the question we'll try to answer in a moment, to give you the taste of what studying translation is like. So let's try to answer this question. First of all, we have to say that, and we'll be talking about English lexicon today, that English has about 250,000 words, not counting inflection. Probably the richest vocabulary of all 7,000 odd existing languages on Earth. And as those examples come from Bill Bryson's The Mother Tongue. As Bill Bryson says, there are words for everything. There is a word in English for a morbid fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth. Of course you know it. And if you don't, you will be asked the same question later in the exercise form I have already mentioned. English has a word for sudden breaking off of thought. And if you don't know it, you will be able to look it up later, to Google it. English has one word for an urge, and people sometimes experience such urge to look through the windows of the homes you pass. All the questions I am asking here in this presentation will be repeated later in the exercise form, so you'll be able to try to answer them, or at least some of them. So we have established that there are hundreds of thousands words in the English lexicon, and let me repeat the question. We'll be trying to answer a simple question, and this simple question is this: where do they come from? How did it come to pass that we have all those words in the English language? Right. So here is the question again. Moving on, and a list of those so-called word formation processes is coming. So words are created through coinage. Well, which means that they are invented. Just remember a quote from Otto Jespersen, one of the greatest language scholars of the 19th and 20th centuries, who said that words are created in 4 ways: by adding to them, by subtracting from them, by doing nothing to them, and by inventing them. So coinage, or inventing words, creating words, is one of Otto Jespersen categories of word formation processes. Right. We'll have several more. The one that was not mentioned by Jespersen but a very productive very productive word formation process is borrowing words from other languages. Number 3 is compounding, which means gluing words together. Number 4 is blending. When you take the beginning of one word and join it to the ending of another, this process is called blending. We'll have examples of each of those processes in a moment. The next process is clipping. When you make the words shorter, sometimes it seems that the English speakers, native English speakers, hate all the words that have more than one syllable. So when they see a 2-syllable word or 3-syllable word, they always try to make it shorter. We have something like that in Polish, but certainly the process in Polish is not half as productive as it is in English. Then we have a process called backformation. All the definitions will be repeated in a moment. But in this process, typically part of speech changes. So typically a noun is changed into a verb, and the form of that noun is shortened. We'll explain better in a moment. So the word that is the end result of backformation is typically shorter than the original one. It will be explained one more time in a moment. Conversion is a process where typically, again, as in backformation, part of speech changes, very typically again from noun to verb, but the form remains unchanged, at least the graphical form. Sometimes the phonological, the phonetic, the sound, sometimes the pronunciation changes, but it's only a matter of stress. To simplify, you can say that in conversion, the form does not change, while the part of speech changes. Acronyms, when only the first letter, acronym just consists of means a phrase, but only the first letters are used of each word, as in NATO or USA or UE, etc., etc. Of course, you know what an acronym is, but this is also one of the word formation processes. Then we have derivation, when you add bits to words, prefixes and suffixes, etc. There are many of those affixes, and this is called derivation. And last but one, rarely mentioned in the handbooks, error. Words are created by error. For example, typographical error in a dictionary. We'll have an example of that later. And finally, multiple processes, which are combinations of all of the above. So let's say a word can be created through acronymization, and then a bit can be added to it through, say, derivation. So sometimes more than one, or by borrowing and then derivation, etc., etc. We'll have many examples of those. So very often those processes, word formation processes, are combined, and then you have those multiple processes. So let's go through those word formation processes one by one, beginning with coinage. Yes, many words are created by writers. Let me consult my notes. One number here is important. That's right, that's true. So there are people who count it, and apparently Shakespeare used as many as 17,677 different words in his writings, and about 10% of those, which means close to 2,000, were never used before, which means that Shakespeare coined or created, just one author, one writer, playwright, created nearly 2,000 words, most of it which are still used today. And here is another quiz, and I will repeat again that all the quiz questions will be repeated later on in the exercise form. So you will be asked in this exercise form, which of the following were created by Shakespeare? And we have a list of barefaced, critical, leapfrog, monumental, majestic, obscene, frugal, radiance, dwindle, countless, submerged, excellent, fretful, gust, hint, hurry, lonely, summit, pedant. Right. Coinage continued. Not only writers are responsible for creating of words or inventing of words, coining of words. Sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes words just appear and they have no known pedigree. We cannot ascribe to them any name. We don't know exactly when it happened that the word was invented. They just are. They just come suddenly into the language. And one such word is dog. For centuries, the word for dog in English was hound. And then suddenly dog appeared and took over. And hound remained, but meaning only a certain pedigree of dogs. Yes, speaking of pedigree, among such category of words that appeared, just appeared in the language are such words as jaw, jam, bad, big, gloat, fun, crease, paw, put, niblick, as in the golf club, noison, numbskull, and countless others. Just one more example, the word blizzard suddenly appeared in the 19th century America, and no one knows why and from where. It just appeared and just came to be, and now is part of the lexicon. Yes, coinage continued. Many of those coined words or eponyms, they are person or place names turned into common nouns. And among such words are sandwich, Fahrenheit, volt, watt, Hoover. Here is a vintage commercial for the so-called Hoover suction sweeper, and I will consult my notes again because I don't remember the history of Hoover that well, but I have it written somewhere here. There it goes. Again, this example comes from Bill Bryson's The Mother Tongue. Around 1900, in New Berlin, Ohio, a department store worker named J. Murray Spangler invented a device which he called an electric suction sweeper. I'm quoting from Bryson now. This device eventually became very popular and could have been known as a spangler. People could have been spanglering their floors, or they might even have spanglered their rugs and curtains. However, none of that happened. Instead, Mr. Spangler sold his new invention to a local businessman called William H. Hoover, whose Hoover Suction Sweeper Company produced the first machine called a Hoover. Not only did the word Hoover without the capital letter become as familiar as a vacuum cleaner all over the world, but in Britain, people still talk about hoovering and not spanglering the carpets. So just a coincidence that this machine today could be called a Hoover and not a spangler. Right. And still coinage continues. Sometimes trade names become generic. So trade names, company names, initially spelled with capital letters, become common nouns. An example of those include aspirin, nylon, Vaseline, Zipper, Kleenex, and Xerox. They all used to be company names. Right, so this is how words are coined. And the next process we're going to discuss is borrowing. English borrows excessively from other languages, and of course other languages do it too, borrow from English and other languages. Polish does it as well. And again, let me consult my notes. That's right, yes. I have here an example. Sometimes those borrowings enter a language through many other languages. So this route is quite complicated. And I have here one example of the word garbage. Yes, meaning food waste since the Middle Ages, and it was brought to England by Normans who adapted it from Italian, the dialectal word garbuso, which in turn had been taken from the old Italian garbuglio, meaning a mess, which ultimately had come from the Latin bullire, which meant boil or bubble. So sometimes those ways into until a word ends in another language are quite complicated. And of course, we have many examples of English borrowings. So croissant is French, dope is Dutch, piano Italian, pretzel comes from German, sofa is Arabic, originally Arabic, tattoo is Tahitian, tycoon is Japanese, yogurt comes from Turkey, and zebra from the language of Bantu. Other languages, as we said, borrow from English as well. And I have a quiz for you. And again, all the quiz questions will be repeated in the exercise form. Can you guess the meaning of the following three very Japanese? Test your Japanese, please. I think it will be not very difficult for you to guess the meaning of those three Japanese in inverted commas words. Right. Sometimes we have a process of the so-called long translation of calc. It is a subtypes. There are many more types of calc, but the subtype of calc is long translation, where a foreign phrase is translated directly word for word. And another quiz for you. Can you guess what will be the English for the English phrase for, or perhaps even the Polish phrase for those expressions from French, Dutch, and German? I'm certain you can guess, and you'll be asked that later. And test your Spanish as well. What would be the English word for the Spanish perros calientes? I'm sorry, pardon my Spanish. Right, so long translation as a subtype of borrowing. The next process we mentioned is already mentioned, is compounding, where words are glued together, joining two separate words, sometimes with a hyphen, sometimes without a hyphen. Sometimes they may even become separate, remain separate, but still be treated as a compound, as one unit. We know that German and Dutch especially excel in compounding, love compounding words, but there are lots and lots of them in English, if not so many in Polish. Yes, so typically we have noun, noun, adjective participle compounds. Let's have examples. We'll begin with those noun compounds such as bookcase, doorknob, fingerprint, sunburn. Well, sunburn may be considered a noun verb, but also noun. Textbook, wallpaper, basket, waterbed. All those are examples of noun compounds. And of course, adjective noun compounds such as full-time, good-looking, low-paid. Well, low-paid is again a good example of adjective participle, right? So easygoing, bedridden, those are already adjective noun full-time, and then adjective participle examples such as good-looking, low-paid, easygoing, bedridden, warm-hearted, and foul-mouthed. Those are typical English compounds. The next process we mentioned is blending, where you take the beginning of one word and join it to the ending of another. This is what blending is. Examples include smoke, brunch, and motel. Well, think of the origin, the two original words for each of them. Normally, I would ask for you to tell me, but this time let's leave it for the quiz. And in the quiz, I mean in the exercise form, you will be, let's return to that, you will be also asked to try to guess the origin of words such as gasohol, smaze, smirk, vogue, bit, and modem. The next process we mentioned is clipping, which means shortening words, and examples of clipping or ad for advertisement. It was first clipped to advert, and then advert was still too long. It had as many as 2 syllables, so it had to be clipped to 1 syllable. Bra for brassiere, cab for cabriolet, fan for fanatic, flu for influenza, perm for permanent wave, etc., etc. Phone, plane for airplane, pub for public house. And there is a superbly, I would say, very scientifically sounding, if you want to impress somebody, talk to them or ask them if they know what a hypocorism is. Quite an impressive name for a very simple process where you reduce a word to a single syllable and then add an ending to it, like a y or ie, and this simple clipping process is called, or the result of such process is called a hypocorism. And examples include words such as movie or telly, or Aussie for Australian, or Barbie for barbecue. Those are all hypocorisms. So this is clipping, one of our word formation processes. Yes, also bookie for bookmaker and brekkie for breakfast. Those are all hypocorisms. Right, clipping. And now moving on to backformation. Remember, we already defined it. So the form is shortened and the part of speech is changes, and it will become clear when we see some examples. So you can probably guess what the original words were. So when we see televise, it is a verb now, but it comes from the noun television. So there is part of speech change, and the form becomes shortened. And donate, of course, from donation, and emote from emotion, and enthuse, to enthuse, from the noun enthusiasm. And the same for liaise, opt, and laze, from laziness. Let's laze a little. What's the hurry? Let's have a 10 seconds break. Less known examples, not everybody knows. Again, a chance to impress somebody, that words such as beg, pee, greed, and difficult are also a result of the process of back formation. Back formation, shortening in the form, part of speech change, remember, typically from noun to verb. The next process, which is a bit like back formation because it involves part of speech change, but this time the form, or at least the graphical form, does not change at all. We need examples. So bottle, a noun, becomes a verb, to bottle. And you can butter your toast, you can chair a meeting, and you can vacation in Florida, of course, right? So here it is, how those conversions or verbs converted from nouns can be used in sentences. Exactly. And they are vacationing in Florida. Continuing on the subject of conversion, this comes from my Facebook page from, yes, I would say decades ago, where I spotted somewhere on Facebook this article, or somewhere on the net, in the internet, this article about authorities in France contemplating dynamiting a dead whale over fears it could explode. So to prevent explosion, they were going to stick it with dynamite and destroy it this way, to prevent a controlled explosion, to prevent an uncontrolled one. And I was wondering about this word, this verb, dynamite, to dynamite. I have never seen it before. I always considered dynamite to be a noun. So I was outraged, of course, and asked some of my native speaker friends, asked them for explanation. I said, dynamite, a verb now, whatever next, to sausage, to tea, to apple. Can't you leave at least some of your nouns in peace without verbalizing them? And several of my Facebook friends answered me. Ian Pincott said, well, to sausage is extremely vulgar, Jacek. Then Marianne Farrer-Hockley, who used to work at the European Union as a finance specialist, explained that sausage, apart from being vulgar, also means a process. As she explained, that to sausage means breaking up a public procurement into smaller contracts in order to avoid heavier procurement procedures. Some shady financial process to avoid taxes. I had no idea, but hopefully I said, well, thank you for that, but I hope that some food products will stay conversion free. So I expressed a hope that perhaps to beer and to cider are still non-existent in English. And unfortunately, I was disappointed because, again, Ian Pincott told me that cider is already converted. The alcoholic drink, cider as in the alcoholic drink made, traditionally English drink made from apples. I thought it was conversion free, but unfortunately it appears it has also been already converted, as in the phrase "cider me up, landlord," which means landlord, give me some cider. And, you can say that it is an English counterpart of this favorite phrase of our Wiedźmin, who used to say "Kaczmarzu wódki." So the English counterpart could be "cider me up, landlord." Anyway, more examples of conversion. So nouns can be created from verbs, as in a must, a guess, a takeover, a printout. Adjective can be created from verbs, as in see through, stand up, as in stand up comedian, see through material. Verbs can be created from adjectives, as in too dirty and too empty. And of course, nouns can also be created from adjectives, as in the poor, the nasty, the crazy. So conversion, a very versatile and productive word formation process. Sometimes the meaning change, which can also, this is what conversion is, but typically conversion also involves part of speech change. Sometimes part of speech can stay the same, but the meaning shift over the years, the historical meaning shift can also be categorized as conversion. So when James II first saw St. Paul's Cathedral, he called it amusing, awful, and artificial. What do you think he meant by that? This is another example from Bill Bryson's The Mother Tongue. And what he meant by that was that it was pleasing to look at, deserving of awe, and a work of art. This is how the meaning of words can shift over the years. And the counterfeit once meant a legitimate copy. Brave once implied cowardice. And a girl in Chaucer's day was any young person, whether male or female. And another example of the meaning shift is connected with the word nice. And I need to consult my notes. So I'm reading from my notes now. Nice was first recorded in 1290 with the meaning of stupid and foolish. So that was the first meaning of nice. To tell someone they were nice, it was an insult. It meant stupid and foolish. 75 years later, only 75 years later, Chaucer was using it to mean indecent and wanton. Then at various times over the next 400 years, it came to mean extravagant, elegant, strange, slothful, unmanly, luxurious, modest, slight, precise, thin, shy, discriminating, dainty, and finally, by 1769, up to this day, it has meant pleasant and agreeable. So this is how the meaning of just one word, very popular, sometimes overused word, nice, changed over the years. Moving on. Yeah, of course, you can think of some synonyms. I will ask you that later. Sometimes conversion can be traced also in this process called fossilization. So why do you think we still use those expressions, strange expressions, neck of the woods? Neck is part of the body, isn't it? So why do we say neck of the woods? Bank teller. Why bank teller? Is this person telling us something? Why do we speak mincemeat? It is a mix of dried fruit and alcohol. There is no meat whatsoever in it. How can we explain that? Well, the explanation is simple. It's the meaning shift. Like with the word nice, neck wants to use once, not today, only in this expression, used to mean any parcel of land. Teller, to tell used to mean to count, and meat once meant any type of food. That's just an animal food product. Acronyms, of course, you know many of those. So in the quiz, you will be asked to decrypt, so to speak, decrypt the following acronyms. Yes, you will be asked about now very old technological devices such as CD or VCR. A word that suddenly became or has become quite an important one. NATO and NASA and UNESCO. I'm sure you know some of them. I'm not sure I would remember all of them now. I remember that the SC part of UNESCO is science and culture. E probably means education. That U in scuba means underwater. B stands for breathing, etc. I am sure you will manage. And of course, my favorite acronym is LASER. I always remember that it means light amplification through stimulated emission of radiation. I wanted to impress you. Yes, I do remember this one. Yeah, I used to study physics. So you'll be asked all those questions later. Let's move on to derivation, probably the most productive of them all. So adding bits to words, lots of those in English. When we talk about those so-called negation or negative prefixes, English has at least 6 of them, 6 of just negative prefixes. Rather rare in English, but still possible when you add something not to the beginning or to the end of the word, but put something in the middle, and then you get derivations such as Hali Bloody Luya and Absagodam Lutli and Unbloody Believable, etc., etc. So adding bits at the beginning, at the end, and in the middle of words is a very productive word formation process in English. And finally, we come to the process of error. Merriam-Webster Dictionary 1934, this word appeared meaning density, a synonym for density. So instead of saying density, you could say dord. This word was a typographical error. Someone forgot to capitalize the first letter, so it should be capital D, and then there should be 2 spaces. It should read D space or lowercase d. So what it meant was an abbreviation. Density in physics is often abbreviated to just one letter D, capital D or lowercase d. But due to this typographical error, a new word was created, and before Merriam-Webster managed to delete the word from the erase the word from the dictionary, other dictionaries copied it, and for many years the word was inexistent. And I don't know if it's here or in my notes. Yeah, right, we'll come to that, but let me consult my notes. I think, yes, According to the lexicographers at Oxford English Dictionary, there are at least 350 words in English dictionaries that, like Dord here, owe their existence to just typographical errors. Many other words owe their existence to mishearing, people mishearing them. So can you guess what was the origin of what we know today as buttonhole? It was once buttonholed. What we called sweetheart today was originally sweetheart. You have to agree that sweetheart is a much nicer sound and connotations. Asparagus was for 200 years called sparrowgrass. And finally, penthouse used to be panties. So many words created through error. And this is basically it. I bored you enough. But I mean, bored you enough with those various word formation processes, trying to answer the question of where words come from. But we mustn't forget that sometimes those processes are combined. This is what we call multiple processes. So here we have this word deli. Yes. So the first stage of this process was borrowing from German, Delikatessen, and then clipping this word. So here we have two word formation processes, borrowing and clipping, working inside one multiple process. And the same happened to many other words we know. To laze is an example of such combination, and waspish, and yuppie, and snowball. And again, you will be asked in the exercise form to name the word formation processes, the two word formation processes that account for the creation of each of those words. Let's just do one of them. So we have this snowball as a verb. Snowball. Let's try to think of what may have happened that we have this verb to snowball, usually used in the context of something becoming more and more increasingly very difficult very fast, because we didn't react to it initially. We didn't react fast enough to, so to speak, nip it in the bud. And now the process, the trouble, the problem is snowballing, and we are not able to stop it anymore. So what happened? Well, there were those two nouns, snow and ball, and someone had to connect them first. And this process, as you may remember from our talk, is called compounding. So a compound was created, snowball, but it still is a noun. And then this noun, without changing the form, was converted into a verb, to snowball. And this process, when you change the part of speech without changing the form, as some of you may remember, if you're not asleep yet, is called conversion. So to snowball is a result of a combination of those two processes we called compounding and conversion. Many more such tasks in our exercise form. Almost finishing. Let's have some more study questions. So, which of the following pairs contains an example of cock? How would you describe the others? So let's have a look at those processes here. Can you see a cock? Remember this cog or loan translation occurred when a foreign phrase was translated word for word. So I'm sure you see the cogs already. There are two, and the other two, and I am not telling you which. You will have your chance later. Are a result of a different word formation process, and again you will be asked which. Yes, right. Could tell you, but I don't think I need to. I will enjoy reading your feedbacks later. Continuing with our study question, finishing our talk is, and again, those questions will be repeated. So can you identify the word formation process that accounts for the creation of AIDS or Xerox or fantastic, yes, or parties, as in she's. I'm sorry for the spelling mistake here, but I'm sure you will understand sentence D. It's supposed to mean she still parties every Saturday night. Kick-ass as an adjective. Doc and vet. Burgled. Sofa. I'm sure it will. If you listened, if you took part in the lecture, if you listened to the examples, you will have no trouble in identifying. Okay, let's give some answers. So what we have acronym, we have coinage, we have infixation, which is of course a subcategory of derivation. Party as a verb created from a noun to conversion. Kick-ass, well, let's say if you are looking for one process only, let's say compounding, yes, and then we have clippings, and then we have backformation, and finally sofa, as you may remember, is a borrowing. And then you will be asked some even more complicated questions like, oh, that's right, it will be a question about Indonesian. So yes, you in the exercise form you will be able to test your Indonesian. So your task will be to guess what's the Indonesian word for the word healthy, or based on this morphological regularity of those circumfixes you can see here. You will be asked to identify, to try to guess certain Indonesian word. For example, what's the Indonesian for kindness, and many other, or what's the Indonesian for honesty. I'm sure you'll be able to answer some questions. Right. So click on the link to the exercise form, which will accompany this lecture. Have fun. Thank you very much for listening. This is all from me.